The story begins with a woman who, after 17 years of what she believed was a solid marriage, discovered that her husband had been unfaithful from the very first year, essentially their entire relationship. Not occasionally, not during a midlife crisis, but systematically, consistently, for nearly 2 decades. He maintained a complete double life, and she never suspected a thing. Not once. No late nights that felt off, no unexplained absences that lingered in her mind, no intuitive pang in her gut saying something was wrong. She describes looking back and realizing she would have staked her life on his fidelity. She trusted him that deeply. This isn't an isolated case of someone being unusually naive or detached. It happens far more often than most of us want to admit. Perfectly intelligent, perceptive, emotionally attuned people, therapists, detectives, psychologists, people whose literal job is reading human behavior, have lived with partners who cheated for 5, 10, 15, even 20 years without ever sensing the betrayal. Some only found out when the affair partner reached out, or when an STD appeared, or when financial records accidentally revealed years of hidden payments. Many never would have found out at all if the cheater hadn't eventually confessed or gotten careless in old age. These stories terrify us because they shatter the comforting illusion that betrayal always leaves obvious crumbs. We want to believe that if someone is living a lie that big, the cracks will show, that perfume on a collar, secretive phone habits, emotional distance, or sudden defensiveness will eventually add up. But in the most devastating cases, the cracks either aren't there or they're expertly concealed behind a facade of normalcy, affection, and shared history. The betrayed partner is left reeling, questioning their own sanity and perception. How could I have missed this? Was I stupid? Blind? In love with a fantasy? The truth is often far more unsettling. Sometimes the people closest to us are capable of compartmentalizing and deceiving at a level we never imagined possible, and love itself becomes the perfect camouflage. When news breaks of a 17-year betrayal like this, the most common reaction from outsiders is disbelief laced with judgment. How did you not know? There had to be signs. Come on, nobody is that oblivious. We say these things quickly, almost automatically, because blaming the victim restores our own sense of control. If she simply missed the clues, then we tell ourselves, then we won't miss them. If she was inattentive or in denial, then we, who are attentive and self-aware, will spot the lies immediately. It's a psychological life jacket. As long as we believe betrayal always announces itself with neon arrows, we can float safely above the possibility that it could ever be us. Beneath that judgment is fear. The idea that a person can share your bed, your finances, your children, your holidays, your inside jokes, and your future plans for almost 2 decades while secretly living an entirely separate romantic and sexual life is existentially horrifying. It threatens the foundation of how most of us navigate relationships, trust. If someone that close can deceive that completely, then trust itself feels like a liability rather than an asset. So we rush to distance ourselves from the betrayed person. We turn her into the exception, too trusting, too busy, too conflict avoidant, too something. Anything to avoid confronting the far more uncomfortable truth that some betrayals are engineered with such precision, and some liars are so skilled at compartmentalization, that even sharp, loving, vigilant partners can live beside the deception for years without a single conscious alarm bell ringing. Admitting that possibility means accepting a level of vulnerability most of us would rather not carry into our own relationships. So we whisper, often out loud, I would have known, because the alternative is too frightening to sit with. The misdirect is the most insidious trapdoor because the red flags are undeniably present, yet they point in the wrong direction entirely. We see the smoke but convince ourselves it's coming from a harmless campfire when it's actually a raging forest fire we can't see. In the woman's case, her husband's sudden, explosive rage attacks, screaming, slamming doors, or shutting down over the tiniest trigger were impossible to ignore. They created a constant low-level anxiety in the home. But when she asked why, he offered a perfectly plausible explanation. He was a first responder carrying the weight of traumatic calls, nightmares, and adrenaline crashes. She had seen him come home shaken after bad shifts. She had comforted him. So she labeled it PTSD, stress, maybe even compassion fatigue. She felt empathy instead of alarm. She became his emotional caretaker instead of questioning deeper. That explanation felt logical, loving, and noble. It turned a glaring character defect into something heroic. He was suffering for helping others. The real source, almost certainly, was guilt, the cognitive strain of juggling two lives, the terror of almost getting caught, the resentment that builds when someone is forced to pretend constantly. Rage becomes the pressure valve for a conscience under siege. But guilt-driven rage doesn't look like I'm cheating rage, it looks like random, displaced anger. So the misdirect works. Another classic example is the partner who suddenly insists on knowing your location at all times, demanding access to your phone's tracking for safety. Most people interpret that as controlling, insecure, maybe even sweet in a possessive way. Few leap to this person is actively cheating and needs to make sure our schedules never overlap with their affair. The behavior is real and concerning, but the story we're fed, or tell ourselves, sends us down a completely different path. The red flag waves proudly, we just misread the color. Over years, these misdirections compound. We collect evidence of something being wrong but file it under the wrong category every single time, until the day the real picture snaps into focus and we realize we had all the puzzle pieces, we'd simply assembled them into the wrong image. The false sense of security is one of the cruelest deceptions we inflict on ourselves. We witness our partner's worst traits unleashed on the world, colleagues, friends, family, exes, and breathe a quiet sigh of relief, at least that venom isn't aimed at me. We mistake being spared for being special. We watch them lie effortlessly to others, trash-talk people behind their backs, hold grudges for years, or discard a previous partner with chilling coldness, and we think, that was them. I'm different. They love me. They'd never treat me that way. We turn their selective decency into proof of our unique value in their life. But character doesn't come with exceptions. The capacity to betray, manipulate, or wound doesn't switch off just because someone feels butterflies for you right now. The same person who ghosts an ex after 10 years, who meant everything to them, is fully capable of ghosting you when someone newer excites them more. The partner who screams at waitstaff, scams a friend, or plots petty revenge on a coworker who slighted them years ago will eventually train that same ugliness on you the moment you disappoint, challenge, or simply cease to serve their needs. You're not immune, you've just been useful. We cling to this illusion because it feels safer than admitting we've tied our future to someone who has already shown they're willing to harm people they once claimed to care about. Being the current favorite feels like protection. It isn't. It's just a temporary shield that drops the second your usefulness expires or their resentment builds. The false sense of security convinces us we're watching a different person hurt others, when in reality we're simply waiting in line. One day the spotlight of their darker side swivels, and we finally understand, we were never exempt. We were just next. The iceberg effect is the reason betrayal rarely arrives as a single devastating blow. Instead, it unfolds in waves of ever-deepening shock. When we first spot troubling behavior, chronic lying about small things, unexplained absences, emotional cruelty flashed at others, sudden secretiveness with their phone, we register it as serious, but our minds cap the implications. We think, this is bad, but this is the worst of it. We assume the visible flaw is the whole flaw. If they're capable of hurting someone this much, we tell ourselves, at least I've now seen their limits. In reality, what we've seen is only the tip, the bright, floating part that sunlight hits. 90% remains submerged, colder and sharper than we can imagine. This is why, months or years after the first discovery of infidelity, new revelations still floor the betrayed partner: hidden children, decades-long affairs, second families, embezzled savings funneled to lovers, secret sexual orientations or addictions, taped conversations revealing contempt they never showed at home. Each layer feels impossible because we benchmark someone's capacity for deception or harm against what has already been revealed, never suspecting the true scale. After everything I already know, how can there still be more, is the constant refrain. The answer is simple and chilling, because human beings who choose long-term, high-stakes deception are masters of compartmentalization. They don't reveal 10% by accident, they calculate exactly how much they can show while keeping the rest airtight. Context is everything. A single lie might be a one-off. A pattern of lies paired with rage, secrecy, and control is rarely the bottom, it's the warning buoy. The iceberg effect lulls us into believing we've measured the danger when we've barely touched it. Assuming this is as bad as it gets is how people stay for 5, 10, 20 more years, absorbing shock after shock, each one somehow worse than the last, because the true depth was always there, we just refused to dive. We become the biased judge the moment our happiness, identity, or survival feels tied to believing the best about someone. Love is not blind, it's strategically nearsighted. We don't miss the inconsistencies, we actively edit them out because seeing them clearly would force us to act, and action might cost us the relationship, the family, the home, the financial security, the shared friends, the future we've invested in, or the fragile hope that this time love will finally work. The stakes turn us into defense attorneys for the very person who is harming us. A sudden drop in affection, secretive phone habits, unexplained hotel charges, new passwords, or a complete overnight change in sexual desires, any one of these could be a screaming siren to an outside observer. To us, they become he's just stressed, work is overwhelming, midlife crisis, he's protecting his privacy after I went through his phone once, anything that lets us stay. We don't ignore the evidence because we're stupid, we ignore it because acknowledging it would shatter the life we've built and force us to grieve while still standing in the wreckage. Cognitive dissonance is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs the pain of truth by rewriting reality in real time. Even highly intuitive people fall into this trap. The heart whispers, something feels off, but the mind shouts back, if you're right, everything collapses, your children lose their intact family, you lose your home, your identity as a wife, your belief in your own judgment. So the whisper gets silenced. We tell ourselves we're being fair, giving the benefit of the doubt, choosing love over paranoia. In reality, we're protecting the illusion because the alternative is emotional and often practical devastation. The biased judge doesn't just miss clues, it manufactures innocence. We become complicit in our own blindness because the cost of sight is simply too high. And the longer we play judge in a rigged courtroom, the deeper the eventual fall when the verdict we feared all along is finally read aloud by reality itself. Intuition is supposed to be our early warning system, yet in matters of betrayal it often goes quiet exactly when we need it most. In the beginning of a romance, chemistry roars like a jet engine, dopamine, oxytocin, the electric thrill of discovery. That biological fireworks display drowns out every subtle whisper of unease. A quiet, this feels too intense too fast, gets overwritten by the louder finally, someone who gets me. We mistake the rush for destiny and label the faint discomfort as fear of getting hurt again, not as the accurate foresight. By the time the honeymoon hormones settle, we're already invested. In long-term relationships, the silencing is even more effective. Love acts like noise-canceling headphones. Shared history builds a library of good memories we instinctively protect. Every new doubt has to compete with a decade of Christmases, inside jokes, hospital vigils, and promises kept. Children, mortgages, intertwined finances, and mutual friends raise the emotional price of suspicion to astronomical levels. The mind reasons, if my gut is wrong, I look paranoid. If my gut is right, I lose everything. So intuition gets voted down in favor of continuity. Then there's the partner's active role. Skilled cheaters don't just hide affairs, they manage your perception of reality. They flood you with affection after suspicious absences, initiate sex when you start asking questions, cry about how stressed they are, mirror your values perfectly, and sprinkle just enough truth into their lies that your intuition has nothing solid to grab onto. Gaslighting erodes confidence in your own readings, you're overthinking, you're too sensitive, I can't believe you don't trust me after all these years. Over months and years, even the sharpest intuition learns to shut up because speaking up only brings pain, confusion, and self-doubt. The result? A normally perceptive person can live beside monumental deception and feel, on a day-to-day level, completely at peace. The alarms are firing, they're just being jammed by biology, history, love, and deliberate manipulation working in perfect concert. Intuition never disappeared, it was systematically muted until the day the camouflage finally fails and the volume comes roaring back, leaving us wondering how we ever missed the noise. The greatest myth about protecting yourself from betrayal is that it requires turning into a suspicious detective who interrogates every text message and tracks every mile on the car. That path leads to exhaustion, resentment, and a life stripped of joy. Real protection looks quieter, braver, and far less dramatic. It is the daily practice of refusing to live in silence. Start by building a relationship culture where truth is not only allowed but expected. Ask direct questions without apology. Why did you delete those messages? Who were you with last Thursday? Your story changed, help me understand. Then watch, not just for the answer, but for the reaction. People capable of long-term deception often recoil from uncomplicated honesty. They deflect, accuse you of paranoia, cry about lack of trust, or flip the script so you end up comforting them for your attack. Healthy people, even when annoyed, can tolerate transparency. They don't punish curiosity. Pay attention to your body before your mind catches up. That tightness in your chest when their phone buzzes, the way your stomach drops when plans suddenly change, the exhaustion of constantly translating their mood, these are not overreactions, they are data. You do not need concrete proof to honor discomfort. You only need the willingness to say, this doesn't feel right, and I'm not going to talk myself out of it anymore. Collect patterns, not single incidents. One late night is nothing. 20 late nights with 20 different excuses is everything. Character reveals itself in repetition. Stop giving perpetual benefit of the doubt to someone who keeps earning doubt. Finally, cultivate an exit plan long before you think you'll need one. Is separate finances, your own friends, therapy, a support system that isn't shared. The moment leaving feels impossible is the moment you're most likely to ignore the unforgivable. Safety isn't found in catching them. It's found in building a life where lies cannot breathe, and where you trust yourself enough to walk the second the air starts feeling thin. That is not paranoia. That is power. No one can stop a determined liar from lying, just as no one can force a skilled manipulator to tell the truth. What we can control is the environment we create around us and the relationship we have with our own perception. The people who escape long-term betrayal or leave it the moment it begins aren't necessarily luckier or more psychic than the rest of us. They are simply unwilling to keep quieting themselves for the sake of peace. They ask the uncomfortable questions early and often, not because they want to fight, but because they refuse to build a life on quicksand. They notice when a story shifts even slightly and they circle back to it later, calmly, without accusation, until the pieces fit or the cracks become undeniable. They treat repeated small lies as data, not quirks. They keep parts of their life, money, friendships, self-esteem untangled enough that leaving never feels like suicide. Most importantly, they have trained themselves to act on unease long before proof arrives. That single habit, trusting the knot in the stomach even when the mind can't yet explain it, is what separates the people who stay blindsided for decades from the ones who walk away after the first real fracture. You will never have perfect information. You will never catch every lie in real time. But you can stop participating in your own deception. You can decide that love does not require self-abandonment, that real intimacy cannot coexist with secrecy, and that your peace of mind is worth more than the illusion of a perfect story. When you live that way, the chronic betrayers either rise to meet the standard of radical honesty or they self-select out of your life quickly. The ones capable of truth stay, breathe easier, and love deeper because nothing is hidden. The ones who need shadows to thrive fade away long before they can build 17 years of damage. That is the only reliable shield most of us will ever have, not omniscience, but the quiet, unbreakable refusal to betray ourselves first.